First off, thank you all for your presence, both in person and virtually. We have a great lineup of speakers today, including Alderwoman Heather Navarro, Alderwoman Annie Rice, youth activist Lauryn Donovan, the Co-President of the St. Louis Chapter of the League of Women's Voters, Louise Wilkerson, State Representative Rasheen Aldridge, State Senator Jamilah Nasheed, and Isra Allison, Cori Bush's campaign manager and the former executive director of Brand New Congress. My name is Vera Rosenblum, and I'm a freshman at Metro High School. 100 years ago, where we stand, for the very first time in their lives, St. Louis women were registering to vote. They were the first of generations of women who came before them to have a voice in politics and government, and they intended to use it. The mood of the event was joyous. The League of Women's Voters brought the registration papers, and the attendees brought the party. Women and men paraded through the streets of our downtown, celebrating their newly attained status as registered voters. This event marked the beginning of St. Louis women's direct involvement in politics, a day worthy of celebration. While it is important to commemorate the suffragists who fought to obtain the rights we have today, we must acknowledge the fact that there were many faults in the suffrage movement, such as the failure to go to bat for black women during the hostile race relations of the 1910s and 20s. A quick glance at many of the national suffrage organizations will reveal an almost entirely white membership, failing to reflect the work of women of color in the suffrage movement. While St. Louis was home to one of the more inclusive movements, with women such as Edna Gellhorn, Lucille Milner, and Virginia Minor working to actively include all women in the conversation of suffrage, the national climate left much to be desired in terms of the representation of African American women. We also must acknowledge the fact that the fight against voter inequality is far from over. Voter suppression has consistently targeted the most oppressed and marginalized groups in our country. We must continue to ensure that we are all granted an equal voice in our democracy and that our right to vote is protected at all costs. All of this considered, I do want to thank the suffragists, the St. Louis women who fought tirelessly for our right to vote, who believed in the importance of our voice in politics and government. Learning about the suffrage movement has helped me to understand that voting is a privilege, one that we should never take for granted. To quote Lucille Milner, "In these days of blood and iron, of tears and sacrifice, of devilish peace and peaceful devilishness, there is work, both active and passive, of many kinds, for the willing hands of women. And be it said to women's everlasting honor and glory, the slackers in her sex are in the minority." Now, with great honor, I'd like to introduce Alderwoman Heather Navarro of the 28th Ward. Alderwoman Navarro was elected to the St. Louis Board of Aldermen in 2017 and has served on the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. With no further ado, Alderwoman Heather Navarro.
Thank you, Vera, and thank you to Civitas for putting on this wonderful event. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, I am grateful to stand up here as an elected representative at the Board of Aldermen here in the city of St. Louis, a body that we should probably start referring to as the Board of Alderwomen, as we now make up a majority of the seats at the board. I know, that's definitely something worth applauding for. I'm also grateful to all of the women who have come before me to make it possible for me to stand up here today, and especially for that right to vote. It can be hard for us to imagine what it would be like to be denied an education, the right to work, to play sports, to buy a house, or run for office. But women have had to fight for all of these things, and it's taken well over 100 years for us to say that we have these rights. And as Vera said, there are so many people who still struggle for these basic rights. There's so many of our sisters that don't just fight as women, but as black women, brown women, indigenous women, gay, bisexual, and trans. And it's so important that our movement include all of us, that we fight for each one of us. One of the things I think about when I look at 100 years of women's suffrage and what can we learn from all the women that have been involved in this movement, and it's persistence. You know, the women who started the campaign for the right to vote, many of them never actually saw or experienced that right. They were one in many generations who had to keep coming back after the door was slammed in their face year after year. And just think, if that second generation of women had said, you know, this is just too hard. It's never gonna happen. I'm not gonna see it in my lifetime. What if they just gave up and went home? The third generation who came along after them would have never passed that over the finish line. And I think it's so important for us to remember that because it's so easy to get discouraged. We all know what it's like to lose. You know, whether it's a championship game or you get that rejection letter from a school or from a job. I know I was waitlisted at my top college of choice, and I was laid off from my first law job in 2008 during the recession. Those kinds of losses are devastating. Just think of what the women who fought for this right to vote, what they had to put up with year after year, and knowing, again, that they may never actually get the right to vote, but they put themselves out there over and over again, and that is a lesson that I take to heart every day when I go to work. You know, if they hadn't done that, we probably wouldn't be standing here celebrating today. I think the other thing that's really important for us to remember is that we all have power. We're born with power. We don't have to wait for someone to give it to us. We don't have to earn it. You were born with power. Your voice matters. You matter. Your actions matter. And don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't ever forget that. So stand up for what you believe in. Never give up. And remember that it's going to take all of us working together. The best causes often take generations for us to achieve, and we can only do it together. So I'm very proud to be up here with all of you today and to see the work of the women here today, these young women. I know you all are going to go on to do great things, and I'm very grateful to be a part of Civitas. And thank you for making me a part of your special celebration today. And please remember, don't ever give up. Keep fighting. We still have a lot more to fight for. And as Vera so well put, there's so many other people out there who need us as well to join in the fight. We all need to come together and use our power for good. So don't give up and stay in the fight. And remember, it takes all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Heather Navarro. What an inspirational message. Hello, my name is Sarah Herzog, and I am a sophomore at Crossroads College Prep. Next, it will be my great honor to introduce 8th Ward Alderwoman Annie Rice. Since her election to the Board of Aldermen in 2018, Alderwoman Annie Rice has accomplished a multitude of things for the betterment of every St. Louis citizen. Annie Rice currently serves on the Health and Human Services, Public Utilities, and Convention and Tourism Committees of the Board of Aldermen. Before her election in 2018, Annie Rice served as a Democratic committeewoman for the 8th Ward and the 5th Senate District. Her values include smart public safety, inclusion, and equitable opportunities for all. Furthermore, to quote the Missouri women, on how we should live in the best possible way. Now, as never before, we should remember the basic principles of Americanism. In union there is strength, and united we stand, and divided we fall. We are incredibly grateful to have Alderwoman Annie Rice speak here today. So, without further ado, Alderwoman Annie Rice. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Sarah, and thank you to all of you who put this event on today. It's really inspiring to be amongst young women who are determined to continue democracy, to participate, to vote, to encourage your friends, your peers. It's very important that the next generation is ready to go. Voting is the basic, right? It is the thing that we should have been guaranteed from the beginning of our country, but we weren't all guaranteed. And even now, we continue to have to fight for the right to vote. Missouri is one of the most difficult states to vote in, and especially in this election when we're facing public health challenges that we've never seen before, the barriers that we put in place as a state and as a country to be able to access the ballot just continue to pile up. We continue to see how difficult it is for us to vote, and especially people who have less resources. Missouri has tried to continue to pass voter ID laws that say that you have to have a valid ID to walk into a voting booth. But in order to get an ID, you have to be able to pay the money to get an ID. You have to be able to access your original documents. There are steps after steps after steps that have been put in place. And I shouldn't call them steps, we should call them barriers. There are barriers that are put in place to keep people from being able to exercise their right to vote. So as we celebrate this 100 years of suffrage for women, for white women, right, then we need to continue to recognize where those challenges exist and continue to work to pull those barriers down. So particularly thinking about our Native American residents and citizens of the United States. They are full citizens, but yet even now are still facing barriers to accessing the ballot. There are court decisions continuing to say that they are allowed to register at their reservation addresses, right? The fact that that is even up for debate. Why would we as a country want to keep people from being able to vote? We don't want to keep people from paying taxes. We don't want to keep people from participating in our economy, but we continue to put these blocks in front of people to keep them from being able to vote. And I ask you just to consider why. What is it that makes one vote more valuable to a lawmaker than another one, right? And these things are wrong, and we need to continue to call them out and fight against them and elect people who will also tear down those barriers. So when we're talking all the way down the ballot, right now in a November election is exciting. We have the President of the United States up for election. It's exciting, it's kind of sexy, right? Because you're voting for the top, right? But every single person on your ballot as you work on down is vital to your democracy. So alder people, we represent about 11,000 people per each alder person. That's not very many people when you consider the entirety of the United States, but we're the ones who most directly affect your lives. Your state representatives are currently on your ballot. There are judges on your ballot that we get to vote to retain. There are tax issues. There are constitutional amendments trying to change the way that we count people in Missouri. So all of these things are so important for you to research, to get involved in, and to know that each vote really does matter. Your vote matters. Your ability to get your neighbor to come and vote with you matters. Their ability to access the ballot matters. So I just want to continue to lift up the challenges that we have, as well as the right and privilege. Maybe if I step back, that'll be a little bit better there. Sorry about it. So I just thank you so much for putting this on. I want to thank all of the people who came before us to fight for our rights, to get us to where we are now, for incredible secretaries of state that removed barriers for us to vote, and we should consider not voting for those that are trying to put more barriers in front of us. So I don't want to get partisan on this, but thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, young women, for being the next generation to move up with us. It is inspiring to know that there's another generation ready to go. I don't think I'm an old lady yet here, but we're grateful to have the experience talking with you, and thank you so much for this opportunity today.
Hello, my name is Alice Kavarik, and I'm a 9th grader at Metro High School. So when my friend Vera, who's brilliant, came up with the idea of this event, I was thrilled to have found a way to take action. As a young person who cannot vote, I and my friends often feel helpless about what we can do politically. Especially now with the Black Lives Matter movement and the pandemic, there's just a lot going on. So when we first started brainstorming for this event, we knew that we had to cover the intersectionality of feminism, voting rights, and race. We must keep in mind that a big motivator for early suffragists to fight for their right to vote was the fact that Black men were granted the right before them. As in the case with all history in America, ethnicity is a key factor in why things played out the way they did. And ignoring this is to ignore the persistent horror of racism and hate in this country. For this reason, it is vital that we address the suffrage of people of color who have been consistently faced with, as Annie Rice was saying,
barriers in terms of voting, so voter suppression. And that is the death of democracy. Voting is power. White women got the vote in 1920, but black women and black people in general were kept from voting through the use of poll taxes, impossible literacy tests, and racist intimidation, especially in the Jim Crow South. It wasn't until 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was passed, prohibiting the use of these discriminatory voting practices, that voting for black Americans became more or less accessible. And Annie was talking about this as well. Indigenous people were not fully granted the right to citizenship and therefore the right to vote until 1924. And even then, some Western states continued to bar Indigenous people from voting. It wasn't until 1957 and 58 when Utah and North Dakota finally extended voting rights to on-reservation Native Americans. These are just two of the minorities affected by voter suppression, though there are countless others. And let's be clear, the fight isn't over yet. Just look at the 3.5 million black Americans who were kept from voting in Florida in the 2000 election. Or, more recently, the allegation that the Trump campaign targeted black voters with anti-Hillary Clinton ads, and in doing so, compromised the records of 198 million Americans. Even today, Indigenous people are unable to vote, are unable to obtain a voter ID because of the government's lack of care to provide them with a reservation residential address. Again, these are just a few examples. There are so many stories the American people have about their struggle for the right to vote. So how can we fix this? Vote. Your vote is power. If it wasn't, they wouldn't be trying to make it so difficult for you to practice your right as an American citizen. It might not be life or death for you, but it is for so many hardworking Americans. You can go to www.vote.org for information on voting and who's on your ballot. It is my honor to introduce a fearless advocate for women and minorities, Lauryn Donovan. Among other things, Lauryn has spoken at the St. Louis Women's March and organized protests in the St. Louis area. Ms. Donovan is a phenomenal model of how to get engaged and help your community. And we are very pleased to have her voice featured at our event today. Here she is.
Sorry, I didn't really get the memo to dress nicely. Everybody looks so nice. I love your outfits and everything. Honestly, this takes me back to a walkout I did my freshman year to speak up against Josh Hawley and his policies with gun violence, so it's definitely a throwback for me. But good afternoon. My name is Lauryn Donovan. I'm a youth activist. I've been doing this ever since I was in about 6th grade. I like to talk about an abundance of issues, but one topic that I know needs to be addressed is the voting that's going on right now. In America, we've had a cruel past with providing rights to people who live here. I say people who live here opposed to citizens because our residency status didn't and still doesn't even give us some rights, specifically the right to vote. Even in 1920, not all women could vote. And I recall going back and forth with my 8th grade U.S. history teacher talking about this. She told me the 19th Amendment ratified in 1920 guaranteed women the right to vote, all women the right to vote. But how could Native American women vote if they didn't even have their citizenship till 1924, I believe? How could all women vote if not all women could pay off poll taxes? How could all women vote if Jim Crow laws were holding down black people, and black women as well? I'm not sure, but it's what I was told, which is a huge issue. I love to incorporate history in my speeches and provide historical context, whether I speak about a topic whenever I speak about a topic, I'm so sorry, y'all, because I think we can all agree that history plays a huge part in our present day experiences. I've also been advocating for the Black Lives Matter movement, which lately has been addressing our mass incarceration system, as well as a long, bloody history with the black community, along with police violence police reform and abolition. But I want you all to picture this. It's 1965, and the 13th Amendment has just been passed by Congress and ratified by 27 out of the 36 states, I think. AP Gov was a while ago. You just got word that slavery had ended and you were a free individual. But You got incarcerated for trying to leave the plantation you just worked on because of the black codes in the area. You get thrown back into slavery. The 13th Amendment states that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime where if the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any other place subject to its jurisdiction. There's a loophole. So you have mandates put in place that could get you arrested for being within 100 yards of a train station because they didn't want you train hopping. They had black codes in place during Reconstruction that forced black people to stay on the plantations they were previously enslaved on to continue their duty as sharecroppers. They had black codes in place to make sure loitering and being unhoused was a crime. Being black was a crime. And then state constitutions began to create disenfranchisement laws against felons. 20 out of our 50 states currently disenfranchise felons. And for those who don't know what disenfranchisement means, it's when when somebody's in the state of being deprived of a right or privilege, especially the right to vote. And 3 out of these 20 states have permanent disenfranchisement laws. So I guess that the Constitution somewhere in the 10th Amendment says that they can do this, even, with reserved powers and everything. But this is voter suppression. The same way that strict voter ID laws are required in some states, the same way that some states don't permit early voting, the way that some states don't have online registration, and the list goes on. The mass incarceration system with black people has always been prevalent, and I'm so sorry, I can't talk. The mass incarceration of black people has always been very prevalent. During the civil rights movement, the war on crime, the war on drugs, and now we have more police brutality that we can see with our own eyes. The criminalization of poverty, the criminalization of weed, over-policing, and the list keeps going on. The right to vote hasn't been guaranteed always. Now, a few years later, in 1866, the 14th Amendment is passed, which provides citizenships and equal protection in the Equal Protection Clause, but not all people are protected. Then, in 1870, the 15th Amendment was ratified, and the black people who could vote, voted. We got Hiram Revels as the Mississippi State Representative and Joseph Rainey as the South Carolina State Congressman, I could go on and on about this history regarding our rights, and when November 3rd comes, remember the people who came before you. My grandmothers wouldn't be able to vote in the South, and my mother and father were born a year after the Civil Rights Act was passed. I would like to remind everybody that legislation and laws don't change mindsets, but they limit the extent to which our actions can go. But they do help when we practice political participation. And if we start to vote, if we start to vote in people that we want to see make change, we can see change. Whether you're into politics or not, or whether you believe that government has a huge influence in your life, I'm here to tell you that it does and that it matters. If you want to see Jill Shoup in office instead of Ann Wagner, maybe you should vote. If you want to see some common sense in office, maybe you should vote. Vote in every election you can. I know last year we got screwed up by the Electoral College, so maybe we have the framers to thank for that. But there are so many other aspects of government that you have control over. You can vote for your state senators, you can vote for your state representatives, your county executive, your mayor, your governor. The list goes on. Do your research. See if you want to vote blue, see if you want to vote red, but please vote. I promise you, acting like boycotting an election isn't going to do anything. It's not going to prove a point. It's just going to get you in the same position we've always been in, where you have no say. You are the people, and without the people, this system would not work. We live in a system based off of representative democracy, and though this system has a historical past of being corrupt, be the one to change it. Vote people who think and look like you into office, whether they dismantle the system from inside or just make change, period. Do your part and help us all by voting, at the very least, adequate people into office. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the younger generations. Do it because climate change will completely end our existence. Do it because people are losing their lives to COVID. Do it because people's rights are getting taken away. Do it because healthcare is a right, not a privilege. I said what I said. Do it because a child's quality of their education should not be based on the money that can be accumulated by property taxes. Do it because black bodies have yet to receive justice. Do it because trans people are being murdered at disproportionate rates. Do it because there are children in cages at the border. Do it because capitalism and corporate greed corrupt this system. Do it because vulva-bodied people deserve to choose what does and doesn't happen with their body. Do it because dissent is patriotic. Do it for Fannie Lou Hamer. Do it for Ida B. Wells. Do it for Sojourner Truth. Do it for your grandparents or even parents who might not even have been able to have the right to vote. And and though voter suppression is very prevalent, please spread awareness. We worked so hard for this. Please do your part. Do it for the people. Do it for yourself.
Hello, my name is Rachel Tibbs, and I'm a freshman at Metro High School. Thank you so much, Ms. Donovan. Our next speaker is the co-president of the St. Louis chapter of the League of Women Voters, Louise Wilkerson. The League of Women's Voters is a nonpartisan, activist grassroots organization that works to expand voter access, fight voter suppression, and educate voters about candidates in state and local elections. The original rally in 1920 was organized and hosted by the League of Women Voters. So when reaching out to speakers for an anniversary celebration, Ms. Wilkerson was an obvious choice. To quote Ella Victoria Dobbs in her speech, Our Call to Colors, are we doing all we can do? Who should do more, and what else should she do? These and many more questions ask themselves of us every day. How are we answering them? I believe that the League of Women Voters has given people an opportunity to put forth an answer to these difficult questions. The League is dedicated to empowering voters and is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, a topic that is often overlooked and avoided in the discussion surrounding women's suffrage. The League of Women's Voters has helped me to form my views and inspired me to become civically active in my community. Without further ado, Co-President Louise Wilkerson.
Hi, good evening, or good late afternoon. I will try not to repeat information that our excellent speakers that have come before me have shared. So I'll try to give you some different information. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the League of Women Voters and the history of women's suffrage. As you know, we mark 1848 and the conference at Seneca Falls, New York, as the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. At that time in our nation's history, the women's suffrage movement actually grew out of the abolitionist movement. And of course, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and a number of other people of color were involved, very much so. Susan B. Anthony, Margaret Cady Stanton, and a number of others. And I'm just going to speed up a little bit. When the 13th Amendment was being considered, what we saw was a schism in the women's suffrage movement. Sad to say, but Susan B. Anthony and Ms. Stanton were very upset at the thought that black men would get the right to vote before women. And so they split with Frederick Douglass over that. Frederick Douglass was actually for universal suffrage, voting rights for everyone. But he realized that might have to take what you can get and then fight for the rest. So he was saying, okay, we'll take suffrage for black men now and continue to struggle and fight for women. And of course, so we had a schism in the women's suffrage movement at that time. So I'm gonna speed on up. The two different factions came back together about 10 or 20 years later, and they began to work in concert. Now, what I want to point out is this. Sad to say, but women of color played a key role in that struggle, but they were left out of the written history, and that's shameful. And essentially, the League was concerned about getting and keeping the support of white women in the South in terms of getting the 19th Amendment first written, approved by Congress, and then ratified by the states. So in order to satisfy the white Southern constituency, I'm just going to be very frank and use common jargon. They threw black women under the bus, very frankly. However, hats off to my forebears, because they didn't give up the fight. They kept, African American women kept busy in the struggle, and they kept trying and trying and trying to be included. And so when the 19th Amendment was finally ratified in, I think Tennessee was the last state to ratify it, and it became part of the U.S. Constitution. What we do know, and one of our previous speakers has said, was that that didn't mean that all women had the right to vote. You know how it was. In certain parts of the nation, if you weren't the right color, if you even hinted at trying to register to vote, you risked being lynched. And so we all did not get the right to vote, at least legally and in actual practice, until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. I would like to say this, though, about the women's suffrage movement. We St. Louisans can sort of kind of be a little proud, because in 1920, 1919, 1920, St. Louis, the women's suffrage movement morphed rather smoothly into the League of Women Voters. So it was like there was a big convention held in St. Louis of the Women's Suffrage League, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, and it was at that point that they realized that they were right on the cusp of the 19th Amendment becoming law, so they just went ahead and formed the League of Women Voters. So the League of Women Voters comes from that movement. What I want to say is that at the time, there was a very powerful and influential suffragette. They don't like me to use that term, but anyway, her name was Edna Gellhorn, and she was a native St. Louisan. Her father was a prominent physician associated with Washington University, and so was her husband. Edna Gellhorn insisted that women of color be allowed to be part of the St. Louis League of Women Voters from the beginning. And they were meeting at one of the big hotels here in downtown St. Louis. I think it was the Statler Hotel or something like that. But the management came and said that the colored women could not enter the hotel through the front doors when they came to attend the meetings. Well, Gellhorn found another venue for the meetings. She moved the meetings. So hats off to her, and she really fought for, I would say, all sorts of great things to benefit the people. Now, the African American women were not, let me put it this way. Instead of being fully integrated into the league, there was what was called a colored committee. So they were sort of a committee, but at least that was more than what took place in most of the rest of the nation. It's very interesting to read some of the actual history. There are some authors now who have gone back and researched, and they have uncovered a lot of what occurred in terms of women of color being able to fully participate in the league. I'm happy to say that the league, I guess for several decades now, has really turned a corner in that respect. So currently we are enjoying the tenure of our second African American woman who is the national president. Deborah Turner, she's a physician and an attorney from Nebraska, and she's doing a fantastic job. She was just elected. The league is concerned about remaining relevant and significant as we move into the 21st century. Therefore, there is a deliberate effort to become more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive. So when I say diverse, we're looking for men, we're looking for younger people. I invite you to take a look at joining the league. Now, one reason why I joined the league, I'm just going to be honest, social action and the fight for social justice has been my lifelong passion. I wasn't able to do much about it at certain times of my life because of my work, going to school, being a mother, a wife, and all those different things. But sort of when my career started slowing down and I was able to retire, and then I was invited to become a member of the league. One reason why I said yes is this. The league has connections, influence, know-how, and a strong cadre of volunteers who can get the job done. And so the league also collaborates with lots of other groups. So we're not trying to go it alone. So that's what I want to say. And we've had quite a year celebrating 100 years. November 2019 was a 100-year anniversary of the St. Louis League. And then the National League celebrated its 100 years this past summer. And of course, we know August 26, 2020 was a 100-year anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Now, I've talked a lot, not going to take up too much time. Aside from getting out and voting now, this is what I want to say to you. What we have got to prioritize from this point on is getting the Voting Rights Act repaired. If we are, and believe me, I'm really upset when I see on the news that some of our brethren, black, white, blue, green, and purple, are standing in line for 6 and 7 hours to vote in certain areas in certain parts of the nation. That's absolutely ridiculous. That would not be going on had the Supreme Court not gutted the Voting Rights Act. So I don't care who is elected or reelected as a U.S. Senator from Missouri, elected to the House. We have to let them know that we want them to repair the Voting Rights Act. And it can't be a one-time only thing. What we have to do is bombard them continuously with that message. Because if we had a whole Voting Rights Act, we wouldn't be dealing with the voter suppression to the extent that we are. And I think our elections would have been way more fair than they have been in the past 10 years or so. So I would just like to say it's good to be here. The League is glad to have a chance to add its voice. Go online, check us out, consider joining us. Oh, and by the way, an individual can join the League at the age of 16 years old. So we have some members that are that young, and believe me, they are to be treasured because they have tech skills that I don't have and know-how that I don't have, and so we can, marry their skills, our experience, and I think it makes for an awesome force. So let's go forward. Let's hope for the best. You know, the League cannot talk about candidates, right? We're getting real big legal trouble. But we can talk about issues. And so I want to make a plug. Please vote no on Amendment 3 if you haven't voted already, okay? And I have some little flyers here. Anybody that wants them can have them. We have got to defeat this thing because Amendment 3 would lead to unfair representation. We've been cheated out of our share of representation long enough. And so we've got to get the word out. A lot of people don't even know what it is. So we've got to get the word out, no on Amendment 3. And with that, I'll end my remarks. Thanks very much. Have a wonderful evening. Wait a minute. Okay.
Thank you so much, Co-President Louise Wilkerson. I'm Abby Leonard, and our next speaker is Campaign Manager and former Executive Director of Brand New Congress, Isra Allison. Brand New Congress is a political action committee whose mission is to elect regular working people to Congress who put people before party and to make government more accountable and responsive to the needs of all Americans. Isra Allison's tireless work has helped greatly in contributing to the success of politicians such as Congresswomen Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Cori Bush. Many Americans ask, how can a singular person truly achieve change? To that, I quote Rosa Russell Ingalls and say, it will be a heroic spirit burning with a heroism of the soul, fed by noble fires. We are to be disciplined as never before and must strengthen for heroic work and harden for heroic sacrifice. Without further ado, I introduce to you a true hero, Isra Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. I definitely want to say thank you to Vera and all who are involved in putting on this event for the 100th anniversary celebration of our foremothers who fought for nearly 100 years to give us women the right to vote. And as many have discussed today, even longer for Black women like me to vote. So I just want to honor that memory. And I'm also incredibly grateful for the example that youth are playing in this role in our electoral process. It definitely is inspiring for me, and it's truly the part of the work that I'm doing every day. So you all are an inspiration for me. So my name is Isra Allison, and for the last 18 months, I've led the historic campaign for your next Congresswoman for Missouri's 1st District, Ms. Cori Bush. So before getting knee-deep into this campaign, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background on myself and how I got involved. I came to know and love Cori through my work, as was mentioned, with Brand New Congress, an organization to transform the United States Congress by electing what we call extraordinary ordinary people. Myself and a handful of organizers, right after coming off of some grassroots campaigns back in 2016, were called into formation. Donald Trump was about to be the new president, and it was time to look at the 2018 midterms and really the true power that is held within congressional districts, because lives are at stake and Congress is broken, and what we were seeing was corrupt politicians that neglect their communities. What we noticed, which I'm sure all of you do as well, is that our middle class continues to shrink. Poor people keep getting poorer. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Our neighborhoods are dilapidating. And if our government continues to leave people behind, we won't have anything left for our future generation. So that's what this is all about. We figured it was enough is enough of rich white male career politicians, and it's truly time for change. So what we were looking for was regular working people, like I said, extraordinary, ordinary people, people that are servant leaders and have been making a difference for years in their community through activism, and people that pledge to never be corrupted by corporate interests and by lobbyist money, and who are only accountable to the people that they serve. And at Brand New Congress, we received tens of thousands of nominations from all over the country. Teachers, doctors, environmental activists, small business owners, and yes, nurses. We wanted those who say yes to a progressive agenda, who will fight for a $15 minimum wage, will fight for criminal justice reform, will fight for tuition-free colleges and universities and trade schools, and yes, boldly say yes to Medicare for all. Cori Bush is this dream actualized. Cori is a single mother, a registered nurse, an ordained pastor, a community organizer, and the greatest activist of our time. When Cori ran in 2018, she beautifully illustrated that people will exercise their vote for someone they believe in. And that was very clear with the 53,250 votes she received, which was more votes than anyone has ever received while challenging the incumbent. While I served as executive director of Brand New Congress, I traveled the country, knocking on doors and helping campaigns organize power for congressional races in 2018. Our journey was also documented in the film Knock Down the House on Netflix, which highlights the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Amy Villela, Paula Jean Swearingen, and our very own Cori Bush. So after that journey, I came to realize that Cori was someone I wanted to dedicate full-time work to, understanding that she accomplished so many great things here in this district. And with the organizing power across the country, we know that we could mobilize to get her past the finish line. So in 2020, she won 72,812 votes and is now going to Congress. So the moral of this story is that the power of your vote is really important. We are seeing this actualized. So many people are not willing to vote because they don't have anyone to believe in. Many people have given up on the electoral process, thinking that no one is actually going to serve them. And what we need to do is continue to elect regular working people that look like the communities that they serve, that have real life experience and on the ground work, and that are literally nominated by the people. And that's what Brand New Congress aims to do. And if we continue to exercise our power as a community and continue to talk to our neighbors to figure out what exactly is on their minds. So that's what I'm really encouraging everyone here today to do, is to take an example of what we've seen with Cori's race and so many other historical races and continue to make history together. I encourage you all to join a campaign by knocking on doors for someone you truly believe in, listening to your neighbors and figuring out who are the politicians that are going to be serving the people. So that's my role and the advancement of why each and every one of us has a part to play in this movement. It's not just about one organization, and it's not just about one politician. It's not even about those who are running for office, but everyone has a part to play. And what we've done with this campaign for 2020 is we've realized everyone has a part, whether it's a creative part, with social media or digital, someone who is a good public speaker, someone who is a good organizer. Cori put everything as far as her strong suits into this campaign. She's brought on people like myself and many organizers onto this campaign that have helped cross her through the finish line. So when we talk about voting and the importance of exercising our right and looking back into history as far as the accomplishments that we have received, understand that we do still have a long way to go, but we need to realize that this is not just about ourselves, this is bigger than ourselves. And if we continue to work towards progress by really challenging our leadership and making sure that we, A, vote the right people in, and B, vote the wrong people out. So never take advantage of the fact that maybe your politicians have been in their seat for many years. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing a great job. Feel free to go on Ballotpedia, look them up, look at their history, figure out if they should be replaced, and talk to your neighbors. Your experiences may be a lot different from your neighbors' experiences. So understand that some of us have privilege and others are really struggling, and be that voice for your neighbor to be able to make change. So I feel like this is a time for a unified vision. We made some history in 2018 by electing the very first, the youngest woman to ever serve in Congress, as Ms. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now we have elected the first Black Lives Matter activist to ever sit in Congress, and there's so much more that we can accomplish together. So I know that a lot of this whole event is really about recognizing our foremothers and realizing that we have accomplished great things, but again, understanding that we are here to make history. As Corey always says, this is our moment, this is our history-making moment, and we have an opportunity now to make change. And even though, sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. And so we do have a very important election coming up in November, not only for our elected officials here in Missouri's 1st, but for our president and for our vice president, and we need to make sure that we can rally behind them. I know that sometimes it's the choice of lesser of two evils, but we also need to make sure that we can continue to look at down ballot races like, all your alder people, your mayors, et cetera, to make sure that we're all in this together. So I'm here if you have any questions, but thank you so much again for organizing this event and continue to do the good work.
Okay, so next we have Rasheen Aldridge, and he is the state representative for the 58th District. And before that was the youngest elected official in St. Louis as committeeman for the mighty 5th Ward. Representative Aldridge has his roots in community organizing and activism. He got his start as a worker organizing in the fast foods industry for Fight for 15 and was the youngest member to serve on the Governor's Ferguson Commission. As student activists ourselves, we are proud to note he was also the executive director of Young Activists for United for St. Louis and the student co-chair at Missouri Jobs with Justice. Here he is.
I think I'm social distance, right? 6 feet away from everybody. How everybody doing today? Getting a little feedback. Maybe it's my cell phone. I don't know what pocket it is, but I'm gonna step back. Usually I'm also not used to being at podiums where I feel like I'm taller than them, but for those who do not know me, my name is Rasheen Aldridge. I am the state representative of the 78th District. I am also the 5th Ward committee man. But before I begin, I just want to give a huge shout out to all the young people at Civitas that continues to, I work with you guys a lot. I've been to a couple of the forums and talked with you, but even though I'm young, I give a huge shout out to these young people because at their age, I'm 26 now, but at their age in high school, I was not, thinking about organizing, thinking about talking truth to power, because that's what these young people up here doing. They're talking straight truth to power, and they're saying what they want to see done in their community, in their school districts, in their neighborhood, in their state. So please, everyone, let's give a huge round of applause for all the young people today. So I also want to appreciate you guys for inviting me, a male, at this 100th anniversary of the women's rights movement. And it means a lot because I think it's important that, one, people know in all our movements, one, that we all stand in solidarity. All our fights are in together. But we also know when it comes to certain movements, some people need to be up front. And some people need to play a good role as being an ally and stand in solidarity. And as a male that has not had to go through the struggle of what many women, especially our black women and especially our trans women, have had to go through, it's still important for me as a male to make sure that I stand with them and say that their body is their choice. And they have the right to do what they want to do with their body. They have the right to do if they want to run for office. We need more women in positions of power. We need more women that's leading the next generation forward, and we don't usually see that in a lot of sectors, if it's in our workplace, if it's in politics, or if it's in our own community. So I just appreciate you all for allowing me to be here and speaking with you today. But right now we are in a fight of the soul of our nation. It's something that I usually don't repeat from our Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, but it is really true. There's so much at stake. There's so much at stake as we are celebrating, and we're so excited as we're coming up on milestones of the Women's March, as we're celebrating, and we're coming up on milestones of the Civil Rights Movement, and we continue to take these celebrations and don't take them for granted, because our ancestors, blood, sweat, and tears made the change possible in the world that we can live in now. But we can't give up. Like I say, there's so much at stake. We know we have an election coming up. Shout out to the League of Women Voters. I know they're partisan, but I can say who to vote for. We got to make sure we get somebody in office on our state level, on our federal level, but also in our communities that are actually going to do for the people. We need to elect folks like Joe Biden. We need to elect folks like Kamala Harris. We need to elect folks like Nicole Galloway, who's running for governor, Alicia, who's running for lieutenant governor, and so many more amazing women that's going to understand and look at policy in a woman frame. And that's actually what's needed. Someone who is compassionate, someone who has been able to nurse and birth children, someone who looks at things a little different than I do as a male. We need more women leading in positions of power. We need more women leading in our boardrooms. We need more women leading as our principals, as our doctors. And as they lead, we also need to make sure we pay them a livable wage. There's so much that is at stake right now that we cannot take this moment to let up on the gas pedal. As we celebrate right now, it feels all good, but we know on November 3rd that we got to go big and we got to go hard. We got things on the ballot such as Amendment 3 that is trying to do the unwill of the voters. We have things in the future that is potentially trying to overturn Roe versus Wade, the civil rights movement, and now is not the time to let up. It's so many critical things that are going to be on this ballot, so many critical things that will be on the ballot when it comes to our elections in March in the city of St. Louis. We talk a lot about national politics. We talk a lot about state politics, but it's our local elections that matter. It's our local ballot initiatives that really matter. So as we celebrate right now, and once again applaud these young people for being unapologetic, for organizing and speaking truth to power, and we uplift them and continue to uplift them, let's make sure we support them, but let's also make sure that we don't let up off the gas pedal, because there's a lot at stake. As we stand on great shoulders of many, excuse my language, it may be streamed, badass women, we got to make sure we do the will of what they wanted us to do and fight. Fight for the next generation of women. Fight for the next generation of trans women. Fight for the next generation of black women. And as a black man, you can count on me to stand side by side with each and every one of you along the way, because this is all our fight. But it also is a role for a woman to know that we as men need to sometimes step aside and play our role, because once again, it's women's body and it should be a woman's choice to choose what she wants to do, not a man. Because last time I checked, they don't tell us what to do with our body, so we shouldn't be telling women what to do with their body. So I thank each and every one of you, and I especially thank the young people that are organizing today and that continue to organize and have been organizing and resisting and speaking true truth to power, because that's how we're going to make a change at the ballot box, but that's how also we're going to make a change in the next generations to come. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much, Rasheen Aldridge. What a very powerful message. Next up, we'll have Senator Jamilah Nasheed. Senator Jamilah Nasheed grew up with us here in St. Louis and attended Roosevelt High School. She served as a member of the Missouri House of Representatives from the 60th District from January 2007 until January 2013. She was the first Muslim woman to serve in a state legislature. She was elected to the state Senate in 2012 and is now finishing her last Senate term. Senator Nasheed has also been a leader in campaigns and demonstrations for racial equality and she owns her own business for many years, Sankofa Books. Without further ado, Jamilah Nasheed.
Hello, everybody. Are y'all fired up? Y'all ready for November the 3rd? Let me first and foremost thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your schedule today to be here celebrating the 100th anniversary of the first women's voters registration rally here in the St. Louis area. Give yourselves a round of applause. As you just heard, Representative talked about what is at stake here in this country as well as in this city. As you all know, 200,000 plus people have died from COVID-19. Small businesses are closing their doors each and every day because of COVID-19. The racial tension is rising steadily each and every day under the leadership of Donald Trump. Police officers are killing people with no impunity. We have a very, very serious problem under the leadership of Donald Trump. And we have to stand up and say enough is enough, because our democracy is at stake. This is not about just going out to vote to change the laws when it comes to the policies. The only way that we're going to change the policies, we have to change the players. There's no other way. And so I'll encourage each and every one of you between now and November the 3rd to roll up your sleeves and get on those phones and make those phone calls, knock on those doors, and get people out to the polls, because where there's no vote, there's no voice. And we have a choice to change the narrative here in this country on November the 3rd. Enough is enough. We cannot allow for him to stack the Supreme Court. We cannot allow for him to stack the federal courts, because if we do, everything that we have fought for will be turned back in time. So again, we have to get fired up. We have to be angry, and we have to be so angry that we turn up and we turn out on November the 3rd. Are you with me? Are you ready? Say what I say. Where there's no justice, there's no peace. And so we're going to make sure that we're not peaceful on November the 3rd, because we're going to be hooping and hollering and taking ourselves to the polls. Thank you, each and every one of you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. And know that we are in a fight for our lives and our democracy. We have to protect it. Thank you all.
Thank Thank you, Senator Nasheed. That was so powerful. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for all of our amazing speakers today. They've definitely motivated me, and I hope they've motivated all of you. I'd also like to thank everyone at Civitas, Adam at Desco, everyone in the city of St. Louis who's helped make this event possible, and the great team of organizers that I've loved working with. It really means a lot to me that there are so many young people who care about our future and our politics, even though we can't vote. And I've really enjoyed listening to what everyone said. And I hope this event has left you with powerful thoughts and the motivation to get out there and vote. So, thank you.